what's happening around the world
and what's happening here at home. A very good evening. You're watching Primetime News coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Rochelle Pramodara.
And I'm Sandro Ferdinando. Let's take a look at your headlines for tonight.
Sri Lanka finalizes debt restructuring agreement with official creditor committee. Final agreement also reached with China Exim Bank. President addresses the nation. Constitutional Council. Is the SLPP going to put forward a presidential candidate? Confusion surrounds new poster campaign. Sri Lankan authorities to pursue murder charges in sailor's death during operation to detain Indian fishermen. Teachers protest in Colombo demanding solutions. Police respond with tear gas and water cannons. Anti-tax protesters storm Kenya's parliament, drawing police fire.
On to your top story for tonight. Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in a special statement to the country, announced that the nation has successfully finalized comprehensive debt restructuring agreements with key bilateral creditors.
President Wickremesinghe announced that debt restructuring agreements will postpone all bilateral loan payments to foreign countries until 2028. Additionally, Sri Lanka will have until 2043 to repay these loans on concessional terms.
අපේ රටේ මෑත ඉතිහාසයේ වැදගත් දවසක්.
Today is an important day in the country's recent history, and it is a significant milestone. The country has now received the positive results of the efforts that were undertaken in recent times. This morning in Paris, we finalized the negotiations on debt restructuring with the official bilateral creditors of Sri Lanka. We then reached a final agreement on debt restructuring with the official creditor committee. At the same time, we reached a final agreement with the Exim Bank of China in Beijing. The procedural matters are being undertaken at this moment. This is in fact good news to those who love the country.
Sri Lanka won. දෙපාර්ශ්වික ණය හිමියන් සමග
We worked tirelessly over the past 2 years to reach an agreement of this nature with the bilateral creditors. We discussed these matters in length. Recently achieved economic success was a pillar of strength towards these negotiations. In order to successfully conclude these negotiations, China, the Exim Bank of China, India, Japan and France, the co-chairs of the official creditors committee, as well as other members of the committee and the Paris Club Secretariat provided us with support, and I am thankful for that. We are also thankful to the officials from Sri Lanka, delegates from the other countries, as well as advisory firms Lazard and Clifford Chance for their support. These debt restructuring agreements will postpone all bilateral loan payments to foreign countries until 2028. Thereafter, Sri Lanka will have until 2043 to repay these loans on concessional terms. In 2023, we completed the domestic debt optimization. Now, we have been able to successfully conclude the restructuring of bilateral creditors' debt. Next, we need to reach an agreement with the commercial creditors, including the ISB holders. By following this path, we can secure those agreements. We are continuing with those discussions. The agreements we reach today will provide a breath of life to the economy. In 2022, Sri Lanka allocated 9.2% of its GDP to foreign debt payments. However, with ongoing efforts, this percentage is expected to decrease to less than 4.5% between 2027 and 2032, reflecting significant fiscal improvement. In 2022, the government's financial requirement was 34.6% of GDP. With these agreements, by 2027 to 2032, this requirement will drop below 13%.
මෙම අවශ්‍යතාවය 13%කට වඩා අඩුයි.
Following President's statement, celebrations were reported from several areas.
අප පාර්ලිමේන්තුව අනිකුත් රටවල නියෝජිතයන්
President's media division said Sri Lanka reached a final restructuring agreement for $5.8 billion of debt with its bilateral lenders' official creditor committee.
Sri Lankan authorities have announced that the final agreement has been reached on debt restructuring between Sri Lanka and the official creditor committee on the sidelines of the Paris Forum 2024 in Paris, France. The President's media division said Sri Lanka reached a final restructuring agreement for $5.8 billion of debt with its bilateral leaders' official creditor committee. It added that this grants significant debt relief, allowing Sri Lanka to allocate funds to essential public services and secure concessional financing for development needs.
It's a great privilege for all of us as Sri Lankans to be here, and I think as a Sri Lankan it's going to be a milestone achievement for Sri Lanka to go forward in our recovery process as well as moving towards growth. So in doing so, to resolve our debt crisis, we appreciate all the leadership and the support extended to us by the OCC, co-chaired by Japan, India and France, and also the support extended to us by the Chinese Exim Bank to resolve our crisis, and of course the support extended by the IMF and the World Bank. So as Sri Lanka, we remain committed to continue our reform program, and I'm very confident with this achievement we will foster growth, and also we will have more confidence in our economy. So this particular date was looking forward by all Sri Lankans. So from today, I think we could progress with the other activities. We can see the economy is bouncing back strongly. We have recorded a 5.1% growth in the first quarter of 2024, and this was as a result of a concerted effort by the international partners and the authorities of Sri Lanka. And I must also highlight the fact the leadership extended by His Excellency the President Ranil Wickremesinghe. The government will remain committed, and I must extend our sincere gratitude to the OCC Secretariat as well as the Paris Club Secretariat for all the assistance. Thank you very much, and we will continue all the hard work what we have been doing and proceed with the reform agenda. Thank you.
Sri Lanka signed debt treatment agreements in Beijing with China Exim Bank to restructure $4.2 billion of debt today. The President's media division said that the framework agreement related to this was signed between Sri Lanka and China in Colombo, Sri Lanka. It added that this restructuring provides significant debt relief, allowing Sri Lanka to allocate more funds to essential public services and resume concessional financing for critical infrastructure development.
The United States had welcomed the news of a final agreement on debt restructuring between Sri Lanka and creditor nations reached today on the sidelines of the Paris Forum 2024. US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chang, said that this is a positive step forward in Sri Lanka's economic recovery and resilience, helping build more confidence in Sri Lanka's fiscal environment. She added that the US encourages Sri Lanka to continue the reform process, adopting transparent and sustainable changes that foster long-term prosperity and growth. India congratulated the government of Sri Lanka for the signing of the MOU between the official creditor committee and Sri Lanka on debt restructuring. India said that this signifies the progress made by Sri Lanka in its economic stabilization and recovery. It added that India is steadfast in its commitment to Sri Lanka's growth and prosperity, demonstrated by the unprecedented assistance of $4 billion as well as the role played by India as the co-chair of the OCC.
What is external debt? Sri Lanka acquires foreign debt through several methods. One method is bilateral borrowing, which involves obtaining loans from another country. Another method is multilateral borrowing, where loans are obtained from various international organizations and institutions such as the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. Additionally, Sri Lanka borrows from the open market, which can be divided into two categories: international sovereign bonds and term financial facilities. When taking on these loans, the government guarantees repayment repayment, which is why they are considered sovereign debt. On the 13th of April 2022, Sri Lanka announced a temporary suspension of repayments on bilateral and commercial loans taken from the open market. This decision affected approximately 70% of the country's total foreign debt. However, Sri Lanka continued to repay multilateral loans from organizations such as the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. What is debt restructuring? Debt restructuring involves creating the ability to repay outstanding debt. This process includes negotiating terms for debt repayment. 3 methods were followed in this process in relation to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka sought the services of international advisory firms Clifford Chance and Lazard to negotiate bilateral debt. These firms initiated discussions with the Paris Club, a major organization representing bilateral creditors and countries not part of the Paris Club. A significant step in this process was forming the Official Creditor Committee, co-chaired by India, France and Japan. However, China, Sri Lanka's largest bilateral creditor, did not participate in this process, necessitating separate negotiations. Currently, these discussions have reached a final stage. According to the latest report from the Ministry of Finance, Sri Lanka's total bilateral debt amounts to approximately $10.8 billion, of which $5.8 billion is to be restructured under the Official Creditor Committee's agreement. The Export-Import Bank of China has also agreed to restructure nearly $4 billion, but a final agreement has not yet been reached. The specifics of the debt relief, such as whether any debt amount will be written off, interest rates reduced, repayment periods extended, another loan to service existing loans, or combination of these measures will be known in due course. What happens to commercial debt? Sri Lanka has borrowed nearly $12 billion through sovereign bonds and other commercial loans. Formal negotiations between Sri Lankan authorities and international private creditors on over $12 billion in bonds are set to resume imminently after a group of bondholders signed non-disclosure agreements late last week. The Bondholders Committee said its negotiating committee included Amundi Asset Management, BlackRock and its subsidiaries, Eaton Baines Management, Grantham Mayo Ban Otalu and Co., GMO LLC, HBK Capital Management, Morgan Stanley Investment Management, Neuberger Berman, T. Rowe Prince Associates Incorporated, and Wellington Management. Clifford Chance and Lazard are also representing Sri Lanka in these discussions. Sri Lanka in April rejected an initial bondholder proposal, citing some of its baseline assessments and a lack of a contingency option in the case of continued economic weakness as 2 main reasons for not reaching a deal. Several proposals for debt restructuring have been presented, but no final agreement has been reported yet. Non-disclosure agreements are in place, but it is expected that a final agreement will be reached soon, which will clarify the relief measures for the nearly $12 billion in commercial debt. The chairman of the United National Party expressed the following views earlier in the day.
මේ රටේ ජනාධිපතිවරු අවුරුදු 35ක් 40ක් කරපුවා එතුමා මේ අවුරුදු 2 ඇතුළත ආරම්භ කරලා තිබෙනවා. ඉතින් කල්පනාවෙන් ක්‍රියා කළ යුතුව තිබෙනවා.
The actions that past presidents have taken over the last 35 to 40 years, President Wickremesinghe has initiated within these 2 years. We must proceed with caution. We have absolute confidence that the nation will be liberated from bankruptcy. As we speak, discussions are taking place in France with Sri Lankan officials. After we achieve liberation from bankruptcy, the country must be systematically advanced. There is no alternative. If anyone spreads false political narratives in various villages, those responsible must be identified. Who are those who brought our country to the brink of bankruptcy? We believe that by midnight tonight, the shame of being a bankrupt nation will be behind us. However, if Sri Lankan people do not act wisely, the country may fall under colonial rule once again. This must be remembered clearly. When debt is taken and not repaid, creditors come and settle in the country. That is the natural course of events. Therefore, it is crucial to remember this and support the initiative started by our national leader, Ranil Wickremesinghe, devoid of hatred, anger, jealousy, or deceit, and think about the future of Sri Lanka.
ඊර්ෂ්‍යාව කුහකකමකින් තොරව ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ අනාගතය ගැන හිතලා ක්‍රියා කරන්න කියන එකයි මේ අවස්ථාවේ මතක් කරන්න තිබෙන්නේ.
ඒ වගේම තමයි ජනාධිපතිතුමා අදාළත් කියන්නේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඉදිරිපත් වෙනවා කියලා. මොකද ඔබතුමා කියන ඉදිරිපත් වෙනවා.
අද එතුමා ඉදිරිපත් වී යුතුයි කියලායි මම කියන්නේ. එතුමා ඉදිරිපත් වී යුතුයි ජාතිය ආරක්ෂාව සඳහා. එතුමා ඉදිරිපත් වෙලා මේ රට වසර 12ක් විතර ඉදිරියට ගෙනිච්චොත් ශ්‍රී ලංකාව ආසියාවෙත් ලෝකෙත් බලවත් ජාතියක් බවට පරිවර්තනය වෙයි.
Media briefings will be held starting today at the newly opened office for the President's Political Affairs in Colombo. Prasanna Ranatunga and Mahindananda Alutgamage of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and Manul Shananayakara of the United National Party joined the inaugural media briefing earlier today.
According to the Constitution, a presidential election must be held. As part of the government, we don't want to violate the Constitution. We aren't expecting the government to delay the election for any reason. We supported Ranil Wickremesinghe. We were confident that he will get the job done, given his experience, maturity and ability to accept challenges. 2 years later, he got the job done. He has created faith within the people. However, recent pronouncements of good news are met with skepticism by some optimists who see them as wishful thinking. But those with less faith in the situation remain cynical, believing such pronouncements mask underlying problems. The recent poster campaign has only served to highlight this division between those who love their country and those who seem intent on harming it.
විනාශ කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තුෙන් ඉන්න මිනිස්සු අතර බෙදීම පැහැදිලිව අපි දැක්කා.
ඔබතුමන්ලා ආරංචිය සුබයි කියලා පෝස්ටර් ගැහුවාම තවත් දේශපාලන පක්ෂ මේ සුබ පණිවිඩේ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ පැත්තට හරවගෙන දෙනවා.
අද දවසේ රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මැතිතුමාගේ කතාව
We are expecting good news through the President's special statement. Various parties are interpreting in various ways. That is good. Posters have been put up foreshadowing that a good news is coming, but electricity for 500,000 has been disconnected. That is the solution they speak of.
ඒකම ජනාධිපති අපේක්ෂකයා ඔබතුමන්ලගේ රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්තයා කියලාවත් මේ සුබ පණිවිඩය අදරයට දෙනවා.
No need to assume what the good news is before it is actually announced. Let's see what it is tonight. Let's allow the President to deliver the good news.
Joining an event to hand over a smart classroom to the students of the Pamanuvila Mahavidyalaya in Birgama, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa said that the government is deceiving the general public with its lies.
පාලන තන්ත්‍රයේ පාලකයෝ ජනතාව ඇඳවීම ජනතාව රැවටීම.
At a point where the rulers of the country have made a profession out of deceiving and misleading the general public 24/7 365 days, we can see the attempts to implement the Goebbels principles of propaganda. They create things that are non-existent and ignore what is existent. They twist the lies into truth and the truth into lies. In order to come out of this crisis, we need to understand the reality. The people of the country need to know the bitter truth. Our country is suffering a debt burden of over $92 billion. This debt is categorized as domestic and foreign debt. The general public needs to know the categories under domestic and foreign debt, what sorts of debt require agreements with stakeholders, if an agreement has been reached with the international sovereign bond holders or not, and if or if not the country has escaped bankruptcy. If the country came out of bankruptcy, is our country able to get a loan in the international capital market? Citizens of Sri Lanka must be aware in this regard. The country's administration must provide accurate information to the people. By continuously lying and deceiving the general public and arranging celebrations for the announcement of fake news, they clearly plan to keep deceiving the people.
බොරුව සමරන්න රතිඤ්ඤත් පත්තු කරන්නට සූදානම් කරලා මේ හදන්නේ මේ රටේ ජනතාව මංමුලා කරලා බොරුවෙන් ඉදිරියට යන්න.
The Audit and Accounts Collective of the National People's Power addressed the media in Colombo.
By the
end of 2015, Sri Lanka's total debt stood at 9.3 trillion rupees. By March 31st, 2019, which marked the end of Ranil Wickremesinghe administration's tenure, the total debt had increased to 12.4 trillion rupees. This indicates that over that period alone, more than 3 trillion rupees in debt was accumulated. When Ranil Wickremesinghe assumed the presidency on the 21st of July 2022, the total debt was approximately 27 trillion rupees. By December 31st, 2023, the debt had further risen to 29.1 trillion rupees, marking an additional 2 trillion rupees during his presidency. Thus, during Ranil Wickremesinghe's term as Prime Minister from 2015 to 2019, an additional 8 trillion rupees of debt was incurred. A significant portion of the current debt crisis can be attributed to the borrowing during that period. However, the current administration portrays itself as resolving the debt crisis through IMF interventions, distancing itself from accountability.
අපිට පෙන්වන්නේ මායාව. මේ ක්‍රමය විනාශ කරනවා කියලා කරන්නේ මායාව.
A new poster was witnessed around Colombo and its immediate suburbs. This poster stated that a candidate for the SLPP will be announced. Leader of the Maubima Janata Party, Dilip Jayavira, expressed his opinion in this regard.
I
saw how the SLPP had put up posters everywhere saying that their candidate will be announced soon. We hope they put forward a candidate. However, it is already confirmed that the candidate too will be a representative of the right-wing liberalists. All this time they were discussing how to make Ranil wear the shawl of the Rajapaksas. According to my political knowledge and views, it seems like this was rejected by the Ranil Wickremesinghe faction. Now they cannot say that they are representing nationalism or the common interest of 6.9 million voters. The 6.9 million is no more. So they will put forward a random individual. However, I must clearly state that their candidate will not represent our side. That is crystal clear.
Who is behind this poster campaign? According to the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, these posters had been publicized without their knowledge.
The SLPP has not yet decided who the candidate will be. I am a member of the SLPP. The SLPP will support a candidate who has the potential to win. These posters have been publicized by some other party and not by us.
National organizer of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Namal Rajapaksa, expressed the following views at the party's Mathavachya electorate conference today.
Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed through Parliament. We extended our support to him. We do not see eye to eye on certain policies. Although we backed some laws to be passed in Parliament, there were many we opposed. We had the resolve to uplift the nations from the depths of where it was following the Aragalaya. We had the need to establish a strong political camp, but we believe we must preserve our political ideologies moving forward at future elections. We must strengthen the economic status of those in rural areas.
The Election Commission will be empowered to proclaim the date for the presidential election in 21 days.
The Constitutional Council convened at 6 p.m. this evening to rediscuss the matter concerning the Attorney General. The meeting was held at the Speaker's official residence.
According to reports, the meeting was set to focus on the impasse created regarding the service extension of the Attorney General. The President proposed a 6-month service extension for current Attorney General Sanjay Rajaratnam to the Constitutional Council. The President's proposal to the Constitutional Council was defeated by majority vote on 3 previous occasions. Subsequently, the President's office had called for an explanation on the refusal to approve the recommendation. Head of the Constitutional Council, Speaker Mahinda Yapa said steps were taken to provide a response in this regard. Meanwhile, Attorney General Sanjay Rajaratnam is scheduled to retire from service today.
Thousands of protesters stormed Kenya's parliament on Tuesday to protest against tax proposals, burning part of the building, sending lawmakers fleeing and drawing fire from police in unrest that the president vowed to quash.
Several people have also been killed. The Newsfirst international desk brings us this report.
Kenyans are currently protesting against the proposed Finance Bill 2024, which includes a series of tax hikes and new levies on essential goods and services. The protest, dubbed #Occupy Parliament and #Reject Finance Bill 2024, began in Nairobi and have spread to other major cities like Mombasa and Kisumu. The bill proposes increased taxes on items such as bread, sanitary pads, mobile phones, and also introduces new levies on motor vehicles and financial transactions, which many Kenyans argue will exacerbate the already high cost of living. Youth-led protests have been particularly significant, with young people taking to the streets and social media to voice their position. The demonstrators argue that the tax hikes are unfair and will disproportionately impact ordinary citizens, especially those already struggling with economic hardship. The government's justification for the tax increases is to address growing debt and fund job creation initiatives, but this has not quelled the widespread dissent. Tuesday was the most direct assault on the government in decades. Journalists saw at least 3 bodies outside the complex where police had opened fire, and medical workers reported 5 people killed. Clashes spread to other cities. Kenya's defense minister said the military had been deployed to support police during the security emergency and breaching of critical infrastructure. Protesters had demanded that legislators vote against a finance bill imposing new taxes on East Africa's economic hub, where frustrations over the high cost of living has simmered. Youth who had voted Ruto into power with cheers for his promises of economic relief have taken to the streets to object to the pain of reforms. The Kenyan opposition has warned that if President Ruto does not step down, the situation in Kenya will be similar to what was experienced in Sri Lanka.
A matter that has never happened in the history of this country, where symbolically the Kenyan people have withdrawn their delegated authority to Parliament by taking hold of the mace, and that actually means the sovereign power. The sovereign authority of the Kenyan people is vested in the people themselves. So this is not a matter that Kenya Kwanza and Mheshimiwa William Ruto can take lightly. They have said Ruto must go. It is not Azimio saying so. It is the people of Kenya saying Ruto must go. This cannot happen, not in Kenya. This is a democracy, and a functioning democracy, where the will of the people must always prevail. And the majority have spoken. This is why we are saying Honorable Ruto should do the right thing, the honorable thing, resign before Sri Lanka happens here in Kenya.
Kenyan lawmakers managed to pass the bill before fleeing through a tunnel as protesters outmaneuvered police and poured in. The fire at the building was later put out. Youth had announced that they were uniting to keep the government in check as prices for fuel, food and other necessities have soared. Opposition to the finance bill has united a large party of the country, with some explicitly rejecting the tribal divisions that have torn Kenya apart in the past. Some who had passionately supported Ruto felt betrayed. Ruto had been outside Nairobi attending an African Union retreat. He was expected to sign the finance bill into law this week. He has 2 weeks to act, but faces calls from religious and other leaders to think again. On Sunday, Ruto tried to calm the rising public tensions, saying he was proud of the young Kenyans who came out to exercise their democratic duty in earlier protests. The politician, who had promoted himself as a hustler from humble beginnings, said he would engage them on their concerns.
Sri Lanka's Navy commander said that the death of a sailor from the Navy's Special Boat Squadron who succumbed after suffering critical injuries due to the aggressive maneuvers of an Indian trawler resisting its seizure in the Sea of Sri Lanka will be considered as a murder, and a homicide investigation will be carried out.
Vice Admiral Priyantha Pereira, the commander of Navy, said the death was the result of aggressive behavior of poaching Indian fishermen.
මෙවැනි දේවල් සිද්ධ වෙන්න අවශ්‍යතාවයක් නැහැ. ඇත්තටම ඉන්දියානු දීවර කාර්මිකයන් ඔවුන්ගේ මුහුදේ ඉඳන් ශ්‍රී ලාංකික මුහුදු තීරයට ඇතුළත් වීම.
Incidents like these should not occur. There is no need for Indian fishermen to cross into Sri Lankan waters from their own. We know this has been happening for a long time. Indian fishermen must understand that when they violate these laws, the Sri Lankan Navy or Coast Guard acting lawfully may attempt to detain them. Their aggressive behavior during such detentions has serious consequences. When Indian fishermen act threateningly and maneuver their vessels dangerously, it can lead to tragic outcomes such as the death of a senior Sri Lankan Navy officer, which is a murder. Typically, when fishermen are detained, they are presented before a court under fishing laws. However, in this instance, due to the fatality, the suspects are being processed under criminal law for causing death and murder, and the police are handling the case accordingly.
අපි අත්අඩංගුවට ගත්තාම ඊවර නීතිය යටතේ ඔවුන් උසාවියට ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම නමුත් මෙම අවස්ථාවේදී මේක අපරාධ සංග්‍රහය යටතේ පීනල් කෝඩ් එක යටතේ මරණයක් සිද්ධ කිරීම සම්බන්ධව තමයි ඔවුන් අත්අඩංගුවට අරගෙන පොලිසියෙන් කටයුතු කරමින් සිටින්නේ.
The Sri Lanka Navy conducted a special operation to chase away the Indian poaching trawlers from Sri Lankan waters in the early hours on the 25th of June. The Northern Naval Command deployed its fast attack craft to chase away a cluster of Indian poaching trawlers, having spotted that they were engaging in illegal fishing in the Sea of Sri Lanka off Kankasanthare this morning. The Sri Lanka Navy fast attack craft had moved closer to the Indian vessel, and a sailor from the Navy's Special Boat Squadron sustained critical injuries due to the aggressive maneuvers of an Indian trawler resisting its seizure. The Sri Lanka Navy confirmed that the sailor succumbed to his injuries after being admitted to the teaching hospital in Jaffna. The Sri Lanka Navy has already launched an internal investigation into the incident. Navy spokesperson Captain Gayan Vikramasuriya told Newsfirst that the post-mortem revealed that the sailor died due to trauma caused to his chest. He added that this could have happened by clashing with both the Navy vessel and the Indian trawler. The sailor from the Navy Special Boat Squadron who passed away was Priyantha Ratnayaka, a chief petty officer. A resident of Hipawa Ibagamur, he was 41 years old at the time of his demise. Priyantha Ratnayaka joined the Sri Lanka Navy in 2004 and showed real promise as a diver. He was a father to a 6-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. Newsfirst correspondent said that the late Priyantha Ratnayaka was posthumously promoted to the rank of Master Chief Petty Officer. 10 Indian fishermen arrested in connection with the incident were produced before the Mallagam Magistrates Court. They have been remanded until the 8th of next month. The Rameshwaram Department of Fisheries issued a special notice today to Indian fisherfolk advising them not to engage in fishing activities that violate the maritime boundary.
The economic crisis is significantly exacerbated by the issue of Indian fishermen encroaching on our waters and depleting our resources. It is a matter of national security for a sovereign state to protect its maritime borders. The government needs to be more vigilant about the potential dangers such incidents pose to the general public. They must consider effective strategies to prevent such crises. The fact that Indian boat owners are challenging the Navy highlights the dire situation of these fishermen. The government must address this with urgency.
The owner of the fishing trawler, which was taken into custody by the Sri Lanka Navy yesterday, along with 200 kilograms of ice and heroin, has been arrested at the Bandaranaike International Airport in Katunayake. The arrest was made when he was about to flee to another country.
The owner of the multi-day fishing trawler named Jacob Putta 3 is a resident of Chilau. He had arrived at the Bandaranaike International Airport in Katunayake at about 8:35 p.m. yesterday to leave for the Maldives. Meanwhile, the Jacob Putta 3 multi-day fishing trawler was brought to the Dikovita fishing harbour along with the stock of heroin found aboard it. The drugs were subject to inspection, and the Sri Lanka Navy said that the stock of drugs along with the 6 suspects apprehended will be handed over to the officers of the Police Narcotics Bureau. The fishing trawler was taken into custody by the Navy during an operation carried out in the western seas of Sri Lanka.
From the beginning of 2023 to date, we have prevented drugs such as ice, hashish, Kerala cannabis and other pills worth over 26 billion rupees from entering the country. We found this trawler about 120 nautical miles away from Colombo. Then we raided it in the night. We discovered 138 bags of ice, which could amount to about 138 kilograms. There were also 45 parcels of heroin, which is about 45 kilograms of the drug. In total, we took into custody about 200 kilograms of drugs in total.
පාර්සල් එනත් කිලෝ 45ක් විතර කිලෝ 200කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක මත්ද්‍රව්‍ය මෙතෙන්දී අත්අඩංගුවට ගැනුණා.
Newsfirst with the people.
Earlier today, a protest initiated by representatives of the Teachers and Principals Trade Union took place opposite the Colombo Fort railway station.
The demonstrators, who had taken sick leave, were demanding solutions to various issues, including salary disparities, and in response, the police employed water cannons and tear gas to disperse the crowd.
Teachers and principals who are members of the trade union coalition gathered in Colombo today, protesting for several demands, including the payment of 2/3 of the salary increment promised to address the wage disparity. The police informed the teachers and principals gathered in front of the Fort railway station that there was a court order related to their protest. Protesters who had gathered in front of the railway station planned to march to the Ministry of Finance to demand solutions to their issues. Despite attempts by the police and security forces to intervene, the protesters managed to proceed towards the Ministry of Finance, where a group of 10 representatives held discussions with ministry officials. Dissatisfied with the response from the official, the protesting teachers and principals continued their march, but were met with water cannons and tear gas from the police on Lotus Road. After over an hour of protesting near Olkut Mawatha, the crowd dispersed. Later, the Teachers and Principals Trade Union Collective held a press conference.
We see that this government is ready to suppress teachers and principals. During this assault, 2 individuals have undergone surgery at the eye hospital. Clearly, the government is responding to our demands with repression. Therefore, we have decided to continue our sick leave protest tomorrow. The second phase of the ordinary level evaluations is scheduled to start tomorrow, but it will not commence as planned.
stuck inside their homes, yearning for connection. That's what life was like for families in Kolayaya and Aldenia villages. But with the foundation laid for a bridge, these communities can finally come together, opening doors to a brighter future.
Sri Lanka urged the international community to strengthen laws and policies safeguarding migrant rights at the 12th meeting of the 56th regular session of United Nations Human Rights Council yesterday.
Mr. Vice President, Sri Lanka takes note of the annual report of the Special Rapporteur. The insights of the invaluable contributions of migrants in terms of economic, social, cultural, as well as civil and political domains and recommendations of the Special Rapporteur are noted. Sri Lanka notes with concern the increasing trends of discrimination, racism and xenophobia against migrants, including the alarming increase in far-right attacks on the migrants as reported. Mr. Vice President, as highlighted in the report, due to their inherent vulnerabilities, migrants work under conditions that are prone to abuse and exploitation and are often denied social protection and decent wages. Sri Lanka emphasizes the importance of coherent legislative and policy interventions to protect the rights and dignity of migrants in all circumstances. In 2023, Sri Lanka developed the National Policy and Action Plan on Migration for Employment and launched the Integrated Guidance and Referral System to provide opportunities for potential migrant workers. Responding to a long-awaited need, the Office for Overseas Sri Lankan Affairs was established in 2023 for mutually beneficial cooperation. As more and more people resort or are compelled to migrate due to political, economic and social factors further exacerbated by climate change, it is essential that migrants' rights are upheld and safeguarded.
Search and rescue training for civil and military personnel continued today as well.
Swift water search and rescue training organized by Asia Pacific Alliance for Disaster Management got underway in Kitulgala. Asia Pacific Alliance for Disaster Management international trainers are in the country to train 24 civil and military personnel. Training included various techniques to rescue flood victims and also ensure the safety of fellow search and rescue operators. The training will end tomorrow, followed by a certificate award ceremony.
And with that, we wrap up Primetime News for tonight.
Thank you for watching. Good night.